Let's get something straight. The miserable, unremarkable life you're living is no one's fault but your own. Sure, it's comforting to blame society, capitalism, your parents, the government, or some vague system of oppression for your lack of success, but the cold, hard truth is that you are the architect of your mediocrity. You've made every excuse, avoided every challenge, and wasted every opportunity, all while whining about how unfair the world is to someone as special as you. But here's the reality. You are not special. In fact, you're painfully ordinary, if not worse. And until you accept that, you're doomed to stay exactly where you are, stuck in a loop of blame, laziness, and self-pity. You love telling yourself that it's the system that's holding you back, don't you? It's capitalism, or maybe it's systemic oppression. Whatever it is, you've convinced yourself that there's some external force stopping you from achieving greatness. But here's the thing. It's not the system that's stopping you. It's you, it's your fear of failure, your unwillingness to put in the work, your addiction to comfort, and your obsession with blaming everyone else for your failures. You tell yourself that you could be successful if only the world wasn't so unfair, if only you had been born into different circumstances, if only someone would recognize your potential. But that's just a lie you've created to avoid facing the reality that you're too lazy and too scared to actually do anything about your situation. Look at your performance in university, barely scraping by, aren't you? Instead of working hard and striving for excellence, you settle for mediocrity. You turn in half-baked assignments, coast through lectures with minimal effort, and then complain when your grades reflect your lack of commitment. You tell yourself that the system is broken, that the professors are unfair, that the course load is too much. But deep down you know the truth. You're not putting in the effort. While others are staying up late, grinding for good grades, you're wasting your time on distractions, thinking you can wing it. And then you have the audacity to blame the university for not recognizing your genius. Here's a reality check. You're not failing because the system is flawed, you're failing because you're lazy. And what about your fitness? How many times have you told yourself that this is the year you'll finally get in shape? You start a workout routine, maybe go to the gym for a few weeks, post a few motivational pictures on social media, and then what? You quit. You get tired, bored, or you don't see instant results, so you give up. You tell yourself you're too busy, that you'll start again next week, or that you don't have the right equipment. You make excuse after excuse, all while watching others stay consistent and make real progress. But consistency is too hard for you, isn't it? You want the rewards without the effort. You want to post the after picture without suffering through the grind. And then you wonder why you're still out of shape, why your health isn't improving. It's not the gym's fault. It's not your schedule's fault, it's you. You lack discipline. And rather than admit that, you blame everything else. You sit there scrolling through social media, feeling envious of the people who are living the life you think you deserve. You see their success, their accomplishments, their happiness, and it eats you alive. But rather than using that envy as fuel to improve yourself, you let it consume you. You tell yourself that their success must be fake, or that they were lucky, or that they had some advantage that you didn't. It's easier to believe that than to admit that they worked harder than you, took risks you weren't willing to take, and endured failures you're too afraid to face. You see, while you were sitting around complaining about how hard life is, they were out there grinding, failing, learning, and growing. And now they're reaping the rewards while you're still stuck in the same miserable place, feeling sorry for yourself. And what about your job? You probably hate it, don't you? You drag yourself through the workday, doing the absolute bare minimum, then wonder why you're not getting promotions or raises. You complain that your boss doesn't appreciate you, that the corporate world is toxic, that you're being exploited. But here's the truth. You're not being exploited, you're just lazy. You show up, clock in, do as little as possible to avoid getting fired, and then expect to be rewarded for it. What exactly are you doing that's worth rewarding? The people around you who are getting ahead aren't necessarily smarter or more talented than you. They just work harder. They're not sitting around complaining about how unfair everything is. They're putting in the effort, going the extra mile, and making themselves valuable. But not you. You sit there stewing in your resentment, waiting for the world to hand you success on a silver platter. And guess what? It's never going to happen. Speaking of complaining, let's talk about your personal life. You're probably one of those people who spends more time talking about your problems than actually solving them. You love to tell anyone who will listen about how hard your life is, how no one understands you, how you're stuck in a situation you can't change. But here's the thing, you can change it. You're just too comfortable in your misery to do anything about it. Complaining is easy. It's cathartic. It allows you to vent your frustrations without actually taking responsibility for them. But at the end of the day, it's completely useless. Complaining doesn't change anything. It doesn't solve problems. It's just an excuse to avoid action. And you've become so addicted to complaining that you've convinced yourself that it's productive. Newsflash, it's not. Now, let's not forget your favorite pastime, social media. You spend hours every day mindlessly scrolling through your feed, watching other people live the life you claim you want. You see their success, their adventures, their accomplishments, and it makes you feel like shit. But instead of doing something about it, you just scroll more. You tell yourself that social media is fake, that people are only showing the highlights of their lives, that their success isn't real. You downplay their achievements to make yourself feel better about your own lack of progress. But here's the truth. While you're sitting there wasting your time on Instagram or TikTok, they're out there actually living. They're taking risks, trying new things, and pushing themselves out of their comfort zone, while you're sitting at home watching, envying, and doing absolutely nothing. And what about your friends? Oh, you've surrounded yourself with a support group, haven't you? A nice little echo chamber of people who are just as miserable, lazy, and full of excuses as you are. You all sit around, reinforcing each other's complaints, telling each other that the world is unfair, that you're all victims of circumstances beyond your control. It's pathetic. You found a group of enablers who will never challenge you, never push you to be better, because they're just as content with mediocrity as you are. You all feed off each other's negativity, creating a toxic environment where no one grows, no one improves, and no one takes responsibility for their own lives. Misery loves company, and you've found the perfect company to keep you stuck exactly where you are. You probably tell yourself that you're practicing self-care by indulging in mindless distractions and temporary pleasures. You think binge watching Netflix, going on shopping sprees, or spending hours on your phone is somehow recharging you. But let's call it what it really is: avoidance. You're avoiding the discomfort of hard work, the sting of failure, and the fear of change by numbing yourself with easy pleasures. You've convinced yourself that you're taking care of your mental health, when really you're just avoiding responsibility. Self-care isn't about avoiding discomfort, it's about doing the hard things that will make you better. But you don't want that, do you? You want the easy way out. You want to feel good now, even if it means staying miserable in the long run. Now let's talk about your so-called plans you love to talk about, all the things you're going to do, don't you? You've got big dreams, big goals, big ideas. But that's all they are, dreams. You never actually do anything to make them happen. You're always planning and preparing for some grand future that never arrives. You talk about starting a business, writing a book, going back to school, but it never happens. Why? Because talking about your plans is easier than actually executing them. Talking makes you feel like you're doing something, when in reality you're doing nothing. You're just procrastinating, waiting for the perfect time or the perfect opportunity, which, by the way, doesn't exist. The perfect time is now, but you'll never act because deep down you're terrified of failure. But here's the kicker. By doing nothing, you're already failing. Every day that you sit around blaming the world, making excuses and avoiding responsibilities another day, that you're failing at life. You're not stuck because of capitalism or the government or your parents or your boss. You're stuck because you've chosen to be. You've chosen to stay comfortable in your mediocrity, to avoid the discomfort of growth, and to blame the world for your own inaction. And until you accept that, nothing will ever change. So go ahead, keep blaming the system. Keep complaining about how unfair life is. Keep surrounding yourself with other losers who reinforce your pathetic narrative. But don't be surprised when years from now, you're still in the same place, living the same miserable, unfulfilled life, while the people who took responsibility for their actions have moved on, succeeded, and left you in the dust. The world doesn't owe you success. You owe it to yourself to stop being so pathetically complacent, take some real responsibility, and actually do something with your life. But let's face it, you probably won't. And now let me paint you a vivid picture of the pathetic future that awaits you if you continue living like this, clinging to your excuses and blaming the world for your shortcomings. You think life is hard now? You haven't seen anything yet. Imagine yourself 10, 20 years from now, after you spent your youth squandering every opportunity. You're still stuck in your mediocre job, still whining about how unfair the system is, still waiting for someone to come along and rescue you from the miserable life you've built for yourself. But no one's coming, because no one cares about a man who refuses to take responsibility for his own failures. If you're lucky enough to find a woman who will tolerate your spineless existence, don't expect her to stay around for long. You'll be too pathetic to satisfy her needs emotionally or physically. While you sit there with your skinny fat body, indulging in your endless cycle of self-pity, she'll start to realize what a weak, pathetic excuse for a man you really are. And eventually she'll seek out someone who actually embodies the strength and confidence that you'll never have. She'll cheat on you with a man who isn't afraid of the grind, a man who will fuck her better than you ever could, because unlike you, he's not weighed down by his own insecurity and failure. And when she leaves you, it won't be a surprise to anyone, least of all you, your children. If you even manage to have any, they'll grow up laughing at you behind your back. They'll see you for what you really are, a weak, scared man who couldn't rise above his own bullshit to give them a role model to admire. When life gets hard, you won't be the one they turn to for protection or guidance. Why would they? What could they possibly learn from a man who spent his entire life running from challenges? They'll see through your facade of fatherhood, knowing that deep down, you're just as much of a child as they are lost, scared, and helpless. And when times get tough, when the family's in real danger, you won't be able to protect them. You'll crumble under pressure like you always have, because you've never faced any real adversity head-on in your life. You'll freeze just as you've frozen at every opportunity to grow, leaving your family bone exposed, and without a shred of respect for you. And what happens when society faces a real crisis? When war breaks out or disaster strikes? You'll be the first to fall apart. While real men rise to the occasion, you'll be cowering in a corner, paralyzed by fear and indecision, because you've never trained yourself to handle anything remotely difficult. You'll be the kind of man who gets left behind or trampled over, a liability to everyone around you. The kind of man who watches others fight, survive, and protect their loved ones while you sit on the sidelines, trembling in your own inadequacy. When the world demands strength, resilience, and courage, you'll offer none of it. You'll crumble into a pitiful mess, just like you've crumbled under every small challenge in your life. And when you're old, broken, and alone, you'll look back on your life and realize what you've done, or more accurately, what you haven't done. You'll see every wasted opportunity, every cowardly excuse, every time you chose comfort over growth. You'll be left with nothing but regret, knowing that the potential you had was wasted, that you could have been someone, but you weren't strong enough to make it happen. You'll die as you lived unnoticed, unloved, and unimportant. No one will care that you're gone, because you contributed nothing to the world. You'll leave behind a legacy of failure, excuses, and mediocrity. And the worst part, you'll know in your final moments that it was all your fault, that you could have changed it. But you didn't. You let life beat you into the ground, and instead of getting up, you stayed there whining, complaining, and blaming everyone else,